Hey, good Saturday, everybody. Meteorologist Craig Majeski back with you here in the North Georgia First Alert Weather Center with your Weather Nerds YouTube update here for severe weather 2025 as we're continuing this relentless start to the severe weather season here for April, which is traditionally one of our busiest months, obviously. But boys, it's just been pounding one day after the next after next, and we have a few more days ahead before we finally start to see a break coming our way. So we're going to break down the severe weather risk for today, going through the rest of your weekend, so you can plan accordingly. Now, before we get into this update, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do so at this time. So look in that bottom right-hand corner and make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted on these updates. So let's go ahead and take a look right now. What we're seeing out there right now is a lot of heavy rain back over toward Oklahoma and Arkansas. This area has been really being relentlessly hit with a lot of severe weather, and you can kind of see where all this rain is going, all over the same grounds over Arkansas, Missouri, western portions of Tennessee, Kentucky, getting all the way up there in Louisville. Again, this area has been under flash flood watches here for days, as we've seen over a foot of rain in some cases falling across this area. Now, what we're waiting for, what's happening right now, is what's going on back here over the areas toward New Mexico and into Texas. This is our kicker. It's finally going to kick this thing out and start to see the weather begin to move from west to east. So we're going to see some improvements here, but it's going to take a few days for this to kind of come to fruition. So let's go ahead and break down what we're seeing as far as our severe weather risk here for today as we look at the latest here from the Storm Prediction Center. You know, yesterday we did have that moderate risk. Today it's enhanced, so it's a little bit better. But we're still looking at the risk for more tornadoes and damaging winds, especially in this orange area from Tennessee back in toward East Texas and in toward Louisiana and Mississippi. Those areas under the gun on that slight risk, that level 3. Of course, the yellow there is in the 2 and down to 1 for that marginal risk around the green. So let's go ahead and break this down by the category. We'll look at the tornado risk here for today. Again, down about 10%. So we're not at least spiking into the red today. Again, this is going to be across Tennessee, back in toward East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. Looking at some of the latest data here on the high resolution, I'd definitely say Mississippi's under the gun for sure. We'll show you that on the model data here in just a second. How about the wind threat? Of course, that's going to be a little bit higher, obviously, there in the red, where basically where that enhanced area was sitting across Tennessee, back toward East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. So that's our high area, running about 30%. And obviously, we got a hail component with this as well. Hitting that same zone where the tornado threat is going to be the highest. That's where the highest hail threat will also be for today. Now, this will begin to move off toward the east. We'll look at your day 2. That'll take it into the southeast, into Alabama and into Georgia. That'll be running that slight risk, and going to be basically going to be a damaging wind threat, although the tornado threat's still there as well. So the tornado risk there running lower, about 5% along the Gulf Coast, and there across central Alabama. The green only running about 2%. And the wind threat, that's going to be the big component here, again, across North Georgia coming back toward the Gulf Coast, as we've got some pretty decent winds above the surface. Hail threat, not expecting that for your day 2. And then finally on day 3, we'll move this thing off the East Coast, just that marginal risk here, basically from the Carolinas down into Florida, as that system finally starts to clear on out and we see a substantial pattern change, which is going to be some much colder temperatures across the country. And I'd say at least a week plus of seeing a little bit of a break from the real active severe weather. So some good news on that front. Now, just to rehash, this started a few days ago when we had our busiest severe weather day. This was on Wednesday. Now, the latest update on this, wanted to give you an update, up to 56 tornado reports. So we had several, Lake City there in Arkansas, for example, had an EF3. We had several EF3s here, but some 779 total reports. There were 728 warnings issued on this day. So that was on your Wednesday. Looking at Thursday, it backed off significantly. Only had one tornado report there. And then yesterday, it did spike back up again. We had 14 tornadoes reported so far. I think we'll add some more to this total as well. But again, not nearly as bad. Wednesday appears to be the worst of the days. And I think what we're seeing here for reports here from yesterday, I think will be probably similar for today. 100 plus reports probably likely here as we go in through this afternoon. Now, again, the big story with this outside of the tornado threat obviously has been the flooding rains. Look at all the flood advisories in here, flash flood watches, all of that brown area in here. These are flood warnings, a ton of them in here. So all that water is going to go down these rivers and tributaries. So even once the storms pass and clear on out, we're going to have to deal with the flooding, and rising creeks, rivers are going to flood out severely, as we've had over a foot of rain, especially areas there across Arkansas into western portions of Tennessee and Kentucky. They've had close to a foot of rain in some locations there. And obviously you're seeing the winter side of this. We're getting a winter storm there back off toward our west there. It's heading across New Mexico and into, Florida, into the Texas Panhandle. It's getting winter storm warnings. It's amazing to see here as we're almost toward the middle of April, but that is what we're seeing here for later this afternoon. So again, look at the big picture there. You're seeing all those flood warnings stretching basically from portions of Illinois all the way back toward Dallas, sitting in there. There's a little bit of snow falling back over toward Texas and New Mexico. Temperatures there in the 20s and upper 30s there with that weather. So we're going to be watching very closely how things develop here and across Mississippi and into Louisiana right through here. So we're going to be really focusing on the southeastern model data here as we go through the next couple of days to watch how this thing's going to clear on through. Obviously, you see the big thunderstorm tops there showing the 40,000 plus thunderstorms there, as those storms are really pretty heavy, pretty intense there across portions of Oklahoma and into Arkansas, but just not quite severe criteria. We don't have any warnings out there for the moment, but we are going to see some more fire up here for later this afternoon. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the model data. We're going to break this down and looking at the different components. The first thing we're going to look at here is the heat source. We call that CAPE in weather lingo. That's instability. Now, this is not quite as bad as it was yesterday, but still running pretty good. So we got octane fuel in here for these thunderstorms here as we go into later this afternoon into tonight. So we got some pretty good latent heat. That means the air is pretty buoyant. We're going to be seeing that kicking up here throughout the day here for today. And as those storms will be feeding off that warm air as that lifting mechanism, that cold front, which you can clearly see very nicely, very sharp dividing line there as that's pushing into that air. It forces it upward and gives us the thunderstorms. Again, the lighter the air, the more buoyant it is, the higher the thunderstorm, the better chance of getting hail and obviously tornadoes. So this will be pushing off toward the east. You'll see it kind of pushing off there as we go off toward the east. And I'm going to back this up here to the longer model here. Let me show you that. Again, going back here through the duration of this event. So as this pushes off toward the east, you notice the CAPE comes down substantially. So the threat tomorrow is lower, and you see why, because the CAPE here is much, much lower, although we're still looking at areas across Alabama, Georgia, for example, over 1,000. So that'll still feed some thunderstorms there, especially into Sunday afternoon with that warm, moist air there. But not nearly as bad as obviously what you're seeing across Louisiana and Mississippi for today. So this will push off toward the east as the front starts to clear on out, and we'll see things begin to improve, especially as we go in toward your Monday. So we have the fuel source. We've identified that. Now we're going to talk about the helicity. That is the spin in the atmosphere. We're looking at the parameter here as far as the updrafts and where potential tornado tracks can potentially lay out here. So as I go ahead and take this off, one thing I would notice here as we go in toward tonight and into the overnight hours is they're really clustered here across areas of Mississippi. So this is a little concerning watching that. Again, going those nighttime thunderstorms are absolutely the worst. But as you notice as we go through here time, they really start to drop off as we go in toward Alabama, Georgia. It doesn't drop off completely, but it really drops off significantly as we push off toward the east. So the tornado threat will diminish as it pushes from west to east into Alabama, Georgia going into Sunday, but still staying pretty elevated here for tonight and into early morning hours there across Mississippi. So very concerning there with those nighttime storms. So finally, we're going to take a look here at the significant tornado parameter. It kind of takes a look at that instability we just showed you, plus the helicity, kind of puts it into a formulaic plotting here of where the best tornado threats are going to be here. And you clearly see it stays elevated here through Mississippi as this line is coming on through here, going into tonight. So we're going to watch that closely here. As we'll probably see some tornado risk there, but it really drops off. Notice it really drops off here. Doesn't go down to nothing, but by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're still seeing a little bit here across Alabama, Georgia. So couldn't rule this out completely. Again, it was showing about that 5% risk going into Sunday, but not nearly as high as today. So today is going to be the worst of the 2 days, and then this pushes off toward the east. And again, not expecting a whole lot of tornado activity with this as we go into Monday as that system finally starts to clear. So tonight is obviously the main concern. All right, so we put all the parameters together. Let's look at the reflectivity, okay? That is what the model is going to look like here. Kind of representation of what the radar is going to look like here. We're looking at the high resolution model. Watch the timestamp there in the upper right-hand corner so you get an idea of what you're going to expect here and kind of identify where you're at in the country here as we watch these storms flare up as we go into the afternoon hours here across Louisiana, Arkansas. I know Arkansas is looking forward to getting a break here from this heavy rain, just unrelenting, and they're going to continue to see more rain on top of what they've already got. So this is going to flare up here. Notice by 6 o'clock, we got some very intense thunderstorms here across portions of Mississippi. Could see some supercells there. Those are the ones that can produce the more significant tornadoes like we saw back on Wednesday, for example, and this pushes off toward the east. as we go into the overnight hours. So we'll be seeing this line pushing off very intense storms there into the early morning hours here across Alabama and Mississippi through the overnight period. So make sure you're going to be sleeping. Obviously, you have those weather alerts on your apps, weather apps, and on your weather radios. Have those ready to go for the overnight period, as that looks like we're going to store for a very long night with some severe weather here across Mississippi and entering into Alabama. Now, going into your Sunday, we're going to a little bit, that should dive a little bit, but we did, again, daytime heating. We should see this stuff flare up once again here across portions of Alabama and Georgia. So we could see some pretty strong gusty winds. The upper level models showing some pretty decent winds above the surface here. So 60-mile-per-hour gusts, isolated tornadoes, I think, predominantly down here across southern Alabama, as what we're seeing with the helicity tracks and the best instability in there, east central Alabama, southeastern Alabama, and kind of just right up to the Georgia line. This will go ahead and push on through, and then we'll see things that the front is going to kind of linger just a little bit. So the rain will probably linger into the morning hours here across the southeast. It's got a little bit of a still holding on a little bit of ridging here. So that rain's not going to clear out of the southeast until probably we get into Monday throughout the day. Then we'll see a significant change over there. All right, so the big story again with all of this, with the severe weather component being obviously front and center in everybody's mind, everybody gets into the tornado threat, you really got to talk about the heavy rain threat. We've had unrelenting rains over a foot already, and we're talking about adding another 5, 6, 7 inches of rain into this zone once again. So we're talking total storm totals here, potentially getting upwards of 15 to 20 inches over the entire duration of this event, coming through Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri. That's just too much water, too much rain, and we're going to see the repercussions of this down the line as this begins to clear on out here for today. So again, I want to go ahead and recap this once again, showing you what to expect here for today. We'll look at kind of a close-up. Again, we're talking about a level 3 event here, stretching from East Texas all the way into portions of western Tennessee. That's going to be our target zone. So we're talking about level 3 event here with the severe weather coming in for this afternoon and going in toward tonight. It will be pushing off toward the east, obviously, as we go in toward your Sunday and throughout the day on Sunday, going into Alabama and Georgia. That's where it'll come down to a level 2. But 60-mile-per-hour winds and isolated tornadoes up to EF2 is what I'm expecting here for today. So again, make sure you stay weather aware. Make sure you got your obviously got your weather apps and everything ready to go. Stay on top of what's going on with your local National Weather Service offices. They're obviously our eyes and ears to keep you alerted out to the public. And we'll see how this thing works out here for this afternoon. And I'll continue to monitor. We are planning to do some live coverage here local. I'm into the Georgia area, so we'll be doing some live coverage here for tomorrow as we track that severe weather across Alabama and Georgia. And we'll keep you updated on any changes here on the Weather Nerd channel. All right, that's y'all's update. You guys take it easy, be good, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next update. You guys have a great day. Talk to you later.